Listeners, I see Michael already smiling. He anticipates what I will say. My good friend.
And I put my head on a block, and I offer Mr. Brother Bishop the scalpel to cut it off.
The political leader has said several times up to last night that is not a reflection of her personal views or the views of the party. And you understand, George, how elections at the party level work.
So, Dr. Pei, do you have ties? Do you have ties to the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Pei? Or rather, were you commissioned by the NDC to do the poll?
Information because it seems interesting that a lot of your advice is very consistent with what was said. Brilliant.
Claudette, good luck with everything.
You too, man. May the best candidate win in the town of St. George.
But kill on.
Yes.
You is a tongue man too, so stop at that. Tell everybody you are a tongue man too.
We are a people who have always aspired for more, who've always aspired to do better, who've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can't pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pull together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say we want to win an election, so let's come together.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, or valued viewers and listeners of the Bubb Report, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the program. Of course, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, and we're happy that you can join us for another Sunday of programming here on the Bubb Report. Of course, this week I'm just returning from vacation, both in Grenada and Spain, and it's actually good to be back in the hosting chair where I can actually engage with the audience by way of your comments in the comment section, both on Facebook and YouTube. So we do hope that you can participate as vigorously and as passionately as you always do. Now, and for this week's editorial, now the Director of Operations for the Caribbean Examinations Council, Dr. Nicole Manning, has revealed that irregularities were at an all-time high in the May-June 2025 Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate exams. Now, the report revealed that in the 2025 CSEC, there were 39 unauthorized devices, 4 unruly conducts, 1 misuse of materials, and 8 collusions, 3 unauthorized materials, and 2 malpractices. Now, whereas in the Caribbean, the Advanced Proficiency Examination, there were 13 unauthorized devices, 1 unruly conduct, 1 misuse of materials, and 8 collusions. Now, according to Dr. Manning, over 40 to 50% of candidates may have their results canceled for having a cell phone in the exam, unquote. She stated, quote, some candidates admit to Googling answers because they can't remember them. Now, not only do their results get canceled, but it also impacts their other subjects, unquote. Now, these disturbing instances of cheating brings into sharp focus the over-reliance on artificial intelligence and other technologies by the mid-21st century student. Now, one of the most recently cited studies in this area comes from Microsoft this year, which focused on knowledge workers and their perceptions of where and how critical AI impacts thinking. Now, the simplified spoiler alert here from the study's abstract reads as follows, quote, "The higher the level of confidence in artificial intelligence or that technology that the user has, the lower the critical thinking ability of the user, while the higher the user's self-confidence is the greater their use of critical thinking." Now, as with any other educational tool or strategy, there are multiple perspectives here. Now, proponents of artificial intelligence in education argue that these technologies can enhance learning experiences by automating routine tasks, thereby increasing the time students focus on higher order cognitive activities. Now, despite the potential benefits, there is growing concern that excessive dependence on AI may erode critical thinking skills. Now, studies have also indicated that when individuals rely heavily on artificial intelligence for information retrieval and decision making, their ability to engage in reflective problem solving and independent analysis may decline. Now, as an academician, I am also inclined to call for a return to good old-fashioned accountability. Now, in an era where everyone wants to do things instantly and where everyone wants a participation trophy, I long for a return to a time when students value the important lessons that can be drawn from simple failure and the lessons that can be derived from it. Let us hear from you in the comments about this new disturbing trend of cheating among Caribbean students. Folks, this is the Bubb Report. Please like and share this week's live stream as we take a quick break and come back for the first segment of the program. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to the first segment of the program. Of course, we would love to hear where you're watching the program from this week. Are you in Grenada? Are you in the diaspora? Of course, we know that Prime Minister the Honorable Deacon Mitchell, he is currently in the Toronto area. He's in the Toronto area for the celebration of Grenada Day activities there in Canada. So we do hope that we do have Canadian watchers on the program, and of course we do hope to hear from you folks in Canada as well about the Grenada Day activities. One of my friends, he showed off his oil down and all of that at the Grenada Day. There were lots of cultural activities happening. I understand that the Prime Minister had a national town hall meeting. There were conversations about whether or not there was a heckler or a disruptor at the meeting. We want to hear about that and what occurred there as well. But tell us where you're watching the Bubb Report from. And as you come into the room, please remember to share and like this week's live stream wherever you are now so that others can, of course, get involved in this week's program. Now, as we get into the first segment of the program, this will be the the last time perhaps that we'll be speaking about Carnival, hopefully not until July of next year, but Carnival will be the opening conversation today. And of course, as Grenada closes the drapes on its just concluded festival that was Spice Mas, we will do our final postmortem on some of the issues that animated this year's Carnival. Now, some of the issues emerged included conversations on prize monies for the soca and Groovy Monarch shows, the quality of judging, especially in the context of the Dimashgra Night Calypso competition, the young brother flag controversy, although it's unrelated to Spice Mas, that is a conversation that emerged last week as well. And of course, there was a conversation that is it Bamsi at Large? Is that the lady's name in Barbados that got involved in the conversation? I don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me what that was about. I don't really follow that lady, so I don't know. But of course, on the bright spot of things, folks, Grenada's music continues to be a beacon of good representation for the culture. And of course, outside of those controversies, one can surmise that this year's Carnival was indeed a bumper success. So here to make sense of all of this is my colleague, Raul Titus. Raul, welcome to the Bubb Report this week. And of course, you got into some controversy yourself. Of course, you know, when people like us open our mouths, you know, people go on the attack. People go on the attack. So, Raul, welcome to the Bubb Report. Of course, we were supposed to be joined by Ian Thomas, but I know that he's traveling, so I suspect that he might have some issues with internet where he is. And I do believe that there is a Carnival event in Times Square today, Raul. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that being in New York. Are you familiar with that activity?
Yeah, my cousin Natifa told me that, and I did see a flyer. I think Grenada should have a presentation around 2 p.m. at Times Square. I think there was a flyer encouraging people to go down to Times Square and support.
Very well. All right. I suspect you might be going down there as well.
Possibly.
If you have the possibly. You might be bringing some extempo down there. Now, Raul, this year's Carnival, I do want to begin, of course, with those controversial elements. Of course, we've seen in the past 24 to 48 hours, one of the artists who returned to competition this year, that's Shortpree, he made a social media posting around the prize monies that he received from the competition. And then other artists jumped in, ostensibly critiquing him. But then others like Kirk Sitahal, who was, of course, the former CEO of the Spice Mas Corporation, he chimed in saying that perhaps if the soca fraternity now, of course, the Calypso fraternity, they're organized, and we know how that split occurred in the early 2000s. But there is not a same organized soca fraternity. And his point is, perhaps if they were organized, then instead of one individual lobbying for prize monies and other benefits to be derived from participating in the culture, that perhaps if they were to do so on a united front, that perhaps these piecemeal conversations would not be happening today around prize monies. What say you?
Yes, well, Kirk is, as you know, is quite established and he's well respected. He knows his stuff. He's one of the better Carnival leaders that has contributed, and he is a voice of reason. Some people don't always like his style. He's a bit of a stickler. He has standards and boundaries, but that's what it requires when you're in something like this and want to see progress. So Kirk means well. He has good intention, and he has done very well, and he knows what he's talking about. Just to say, and not necessarily to that one a negative too much, but it was quite unfortunate. The thing is that from time to time people express themselves, whether it's Olive a few
that's
years
Boise.
ago.
That's Boise, yes.
That's Boise a few years ago, or whether it's Shortpree a few days ago. There's nothing wrong with expressing yourself, even if you know that that's the prize money and that's what you will win and so on. There's nothing wrong with expressing yourself. You know, this is a part of therapy. This is a part of how you feel. And this is why when I didn't like the fact that there was this negative pushback and people were demonizing him. I mean, we all are imperfect in many different ways. People were going into the woodwork and saying all different things, artists against artists. It was like a war. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily support that. The thing is, there are challenges and things are not as good as it should be or as perfect as it should be. And maybe it never will be. But there's nothing wrong with an artist expressing himself about an aspect of the culture, whether it's you're not satisfied with the prize money, or whether it's some aspect of Carnival, whether it's the judging, you can express yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. But we are in a era where everybody takes offense over every little thing. You express yourself and you say how you feel about certain things, and then everybody's offended. I mean, I don't know. Is this neo-colonial Americanization of our society, another semblance of that, where we all have this privileged point of view that we have to be offended by every little thing, things that for years hasn't been an issue of offense. All of a sudden, no, we're offended by that. Good morning. Oh, I'm offended, and that sort of thing. That's nonsense. People have to express themselves. So I didn't particularly like that. Now, there are issues. And there's a lot of good positive things about Carnival this year, and of course there are some things that has to improve. That's a given. But a fundamental point that has been made, that Coke would have made, and it also reflects within the Calypso, is the issue of the voice. You have to be united as a Calypso association, or whether it's a soca, a body representing soca. You have to be united to lobby for your interests, for what you want on behalf of everybody. That's how gains and progress is made. You have to lobby, you have to advocate. Now, the Calypso and soca cannot advocate efficiently because they are crippled. And I made the point in an article that it's the politicians who disrupted this who basically was not happy with the fact. Remember years ago when Beeson Scholar were in the front line criticizing politicians, and one politician in particular decided he's not going to have this, and he moved basically and he redirected state resources to support one association. It was split into two. So you had one left-leaning NNP Calypso Association and another leaning NDC Calypso Association, and both NDC fed this and NNP fed this, and you have guys like Ali Gill and them trying to put a good structure in place, a good legal structure for a Spice Mas Corporation, and good judging structure in place. I remember Ali Gill's voice when he was trying to solve this problem. We would only have one association. Well, he didn't succeed at that. So that's part of the problem. The artists themselves, respectfully, have to take responsibility for the way things are today, right? The artists themselves have to take responsibility. But overall, it was a good carnival by many metrics in terms of visit. It seems that a lot of people came in. Even weeks before Carnival, you were hearing there's no room. Every place sold out. Visitor turnout in terms of the competition, the competitive aspects. Calypso was competitive. Soca was competitive. Groovy quality was on point, and so on. Yes, this Carnival, some improvement there, and so on. And, we can do this. They can be tweaking of the template and so on to improve it. But by all accounts, and by even some of the visitors who came, who were doing their online, the influencers, 99% of them have positive reviews. So in all, it seemed to be a very good carnival this year. I'm not saying it's the best. It's total. It's perfect. That's not what I'm saying. There's some issues, but it was a good carnival in totality.
Now, the judging on the Mardi Gras Night Roll, of course, you just spoke about people going on the attack. You were subject of attack as well in the public comments that you made on that issue. Right. Of course, that was that left a bitter taste in many people's mouths who attended the Mardi Gras show as well. Right. Right. So in terms of and as you just mentioned, you just alluded to the competitive nature of the Mardi Gras. Are we seeing sort of a rekindling of that competition, that cutthroat competition that we saw in the 90s in the context of Calypso?
Well, no, I don't think the competition itself, I'm not sure to say cutthroat, because I remember when I listened to some of the songs leading up to the Calypso final, I was like, oh, we're going to have a good Calypso finals. We're going to have some econ coming in because remember from last year with the scholar issue commenting on Innocent. And then I think Innocent did a song about that, and Sour Serpent did a song about that, but of course he didn't make the finals. And I think a couple of the Calypsonians addressed that and so on. So I thought it had the recipe for a nice Calypso, because I like a Calypso finals with P-Kong. It's not personal. P-Kong, that's extempo.
Yes.
So on. So I know that I felt there was latitude for that. So I won't want to say that artists has animosity against artists because you, at the end of the show, you see all them they all get along and so on. But I think we have good Calypso finals. I think it was let down by the judges, and because it's the first time in years I have ever seen 99% of the people were disappointed. And I didn't make my comments in the commentary section. Sometimes you have to tweak your commentary style. So I was particularly not calling it in a certain way in the commentary, but on my personal page, I expressed my disappointment, and in a write-up, I expressed my disappointment because I own those spaces. That's my space. And I did it respectfully to Scholar, because I didn't feel that he earned that title. I did not feel that he won, and I articulated why. I felt the judges fell down on it, and I got certain information which project the dynamics as to some of the reasons why he didn't win. And even yesterday, somebody posted on the New Today, gave a nice account, but they fell short in terms of how they analyze certain aspect of it. And I did give a counter, a respectful counter, and so on. So yes, I dealt with the issue. I didn't go on put anybody's personal attack.
It was not so much a criticism of Scholar as it was a critique of the judging or the quality of judging. I think that distinction needs to be made clear.
Yes,
right.
And I pointed out that affected Scholar as well, because Scholar is the best on his night. You cannot. He's hard to beat. So now you have a situation where he's holding a title that is tainted. That's basically tainted. That's unfair to Scholar, right? That's the point I'm making. I'm not disrespecting Scholar. I have utmost respect for Scholar and his accomplishment. He's arguably the greatest of all time, quite frankly. So that's the point I was making. I was dealing with the judging, and then I dealt with a problem with the judging. Listen, Dr. Bob, it's unfortunate that when some people do good things to reach out, in Grenada's history, we have this history of a group of young people coming together, doing some good things, putting good structures in place, and then we destroy it. It has happened in the Maurice Bishop era with young bright boys coming and having a revolution, and we have a vision, we build a society, and then we destroy the young guys and we kill the bishop. It happened with the Colin Dow and the Ali Gill and these bright guys who came and put a good SMC structure in place, a good judging structure, they brought in the best from Trinidad, and they had a good quality judging. We destroyed that. It happened in disaster management, where we bring bright people together, we work with the Canadians, and we put a good disaster management structure in place. Politicians destroy that. So every time we talk about give the youths a chance, give our bright ones a chance, every time in Grenada, young, bright people come together and do something for our best interest, we Grenadians destroying it. We Grenadians destroying it through politics. And this is the problem I'm having. This is the problem I'm having. How can we fix the politics? Because the politics, the destructive politics, is at the core of everything. So right now, you have Calypsonians who would have benefited. They have nothing to say. They have nothing to say. But those who did not benefit, they have everything to say. 5 years later, when it turns, the next government in power and so on, it's the same revolving door. The Calypsonians who benefiting, they're quiet. Those who not benefiting, they're noisy. Where are we going?
Where are we going? Well, Inspector said we're going the wrong way. So I don't know if that's where we're going. But of course, on the brighter side of things, you know, the music, and that's why, you know, I was hoping Ian Charles would be here. But the music, you know, especially the groovy, especially the work of our producers, you know, experts and all of those guys, you know, who produce really good music for another year coming. And of course, Trinidad and Tobago has already picked up Dashing Leaf. It's on rotation down there in advance of Trinidad Carnival next year. So let's talk about the music.
Oh, the music seems to be going places, and we have come a long way. We have come a long way from the days back in the day in the, I don't know, 80s when Calypsonians and people were recording in studio and so on and so on. We have producers coming along now. We have guys. Technology has worked in our favor. We have a good Carnival product. Our music is out there. These guys are Lava Man. All these guys are stars out there in the region and on international stage. From Killer to Lava Man and so on. So our music is going places. We are doing some good things, and we have good quality. Ever so often over the years, sometimes we have a poor and not so good Soca Monarch and so on, but the standard is still there. I mean, the Trinidad, who is the Mecca, respect us a lot, and the region respect the quality we produce. We have to try and maintain it. My major concern is the back end as well. There's some people that are doing some good things, and we have to support it. I don't know the amount of support they're getting, but we have to support it. We have the groovy. We have soca. We have guys like Black Adam who seem to be doing something good with the groovy. We have the brothers from St. Patrick's, Looney's Park, Electrify, doing something good with the soca, and I'm focusing on the young ones, right? You have Eddie from St. David's and others who working with those young people for the junior calypso and that sort of thing. So you have these labs, if I may say, if I refer to them, that I believe they must be integrated into the research and development. And they must be supported, whether it's funding or something. You have to support them. What Peck Edwards, the late great Peck Edwards, may his soul rest in peace, did, and all the others for PAN, getting all these young people involved in PAN. Those are things that I believe has to be supported by policy and state funding under the umbrella of R&D, research and development. Because if we fail at that fundamental level, the back end, then the front end can have some problems in terms of quality assurance, the time of quality output. But so now we've seen some good things where we have junior soca artists, junior calypsonians coming into the senior role and challenging and making a name for themselves. So we've seen that, but we want to see more of it, and we want to see the connection between the R&D, the research and development level, in terms of what Black Adam is doing for you, for Groovy Junior, in terms of what Looney Sparks and Electrify is doing for junior soca, in terms of what the guys are doing for junior pan and all of that. We want to see it supported so that it can come through, because the total product is important. The total product and the quality assurance of the product is important, but there must be a connection between our development, our research and development, and our output, the total Carnival output.
And the sustainability for that, and that's a generational sustainability now. Personally, it warms my heart, for example, to see a young Cordell Byam with Dimension. I remember when Cordell started playing pan, he was on a soft drink box, playing that tenor pan in Panorama. And now Cordell is one of the leaders. Of course, Peck Edwards has since gone to the great beyond, but Cordell has stepped up to the plate. A shout out to Cordell and Auntie Lydia and everybody who's watching the program now. He has really stepped up to the plate, and you have also young arrangers. For example, there is a young arranger with Angel Haps, and another young arranger who was very instrumental. I believe he's the brother of the Grenadian artist Jefferson Ramirez. I can't remember his first name, but he really catapulted common sharers this year in respect of the Panorama competition. And of course, Isha is saying Vaughn. Vaughn is also another great artist that we have here as well, that we have to pay credence to. But, it's about ensuring that there is sustainability, and not, you have this great generation of artists, you have these great producers, but what will be done to ensure that a new generation, a new younger generation can rise up? And of course, my former teacher, Eddie, does that work very well at the Palmer School. Raul, did you know that I used to sing calypso in Palmer School?
Oh my goodness. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. I didn't have a clue. What was your calypso sobriquet?
I don't think I had a calypso sobriquet. I don't think I did. But I did not make it as far as some of my other classmates did in respect of the junior calypso. So, for example, I went to school with people like Shalima Edwards. She participated in junior. Otis Celestine, of course, he also participated in the junior calypso competition. And of course, we know Dingan Henry, of course, Little Natty was Dingan Henry then, but he used to come up in Pomeroy School and practice and rehearse with teacher Eddie and teacher Lloydie and those guys, you know, as part of that band. So it's important that, you know, that youth participation continues.
Yeah, it moves from one generation to the other, and the whole community. We need to continue the conversation because sometimes we talk about it and then we drop the ball, and then things start to backslide and so on, and the quality start to drop in different areas. But I think something as important as Carnival and a lot of people see Carnival as just, you know, a jump up and so on. But no, you have to look at, and coming back to your question about the success of Carnival and looking at the different metrics, economic success is a metric for the success of Carnival as well. The cultural success of it too, that's also important, but the economics of it, in terms of revenue, in terms of revenue into the country, in terms of revenue trickling down, in terms of vendors, in terms of different people earning and different businesses earning, that's a measure, in my view, of the success of a Carnival outside, and that's connected to the culture and the quality of the culture. So this is why I feel ever so often we need to have a review. That we know what the template is, and sometimes we just run the template. But I feel what we need to do is ever so often review the template. And there's nothing wrong with tweaking and adjusting and amending the template, because if that's what we have to do for the success, the total success of Carnival, then that's what we have to do. If we have to adjust where we put the Calypso finals, whether we have it in Seamoon, whether we have it in St. George's, Progress Park, and so on. If that's what we have to do, and that's what we think we need to do as part of an adjustment for the total, then that's what we have to do. If we have to bring back Juve in town, or costume bus in town, you know, those are the discussions we need to be having, because the experience is the total experience. You want people to maintain the total experience, and already I'm hearing people about 2026. Some people who missed 2025. It seemed as though there was because they
booked late.
They booked late, yes. But the common denominator is that 2025 people had a good feeling from Carnival, a good experience. It was left in their mind. So now that sets us up for 2026. So I hope they can come together nicely, all the organizers and everybody, all the stakeholders, and really look and say, okay, what we need to tweak, let's do certain things better and move forward, because that will work well for the total development of Carnival as a total product.
Yeah, absolutely. Raul, as we get to the next segment, any closing comments? Of course, before we get to closing comments, Raul, of course, many may or may not know, people of a certain generation may know this, but you were part of the Extempo competition. In fact, you also were one of the organizers. I believe it was called the Humorous Calypso Competition.
Yes, I think. Yes, and I think I want to say hi, big up my friend Julia Moore and the Fantasia crew, who also played. We had Talker Calypso and that sort of thing as well.
That was after Carnival, right?
And yes, and
yes,
just after Carnival, and then we had with the late Brian Griffith and Julian Ogilvie. I had a front role in helping them to develop the Extempo, which was one of the biggest things in Grenada. Even today, people will stop me and say, "Why don't you bring it back the Extempo? We need the Extempo." I personally believe we need to look at that bring it back as part of the Carnival architecture, whether you integrate it in a show or something. Well, we need to look at that as well, because it's a part of things that people of the culture that people like, the Extempo. Of course, off keys my father, because I can't sing a key, but I contribute and I made my contribution. So yes, and those a lot of people also don't know that one of my songs was also played on the road by Pan a few years ago, by the Steel Band a few years ago. A lot of people also don't know
what song was that. I didn't know that.
Yes, and also a lot of people that was Preacher Want Nana. The Jimmy Swaggart issue. A lot of people also know that two of my songs, not sung by me, of course, I can't sing, made it to the Calypso finals a few years ago, you know, and so on. And I'm thinking of doing some songs for 2026, you know. I mean, need a voice. I mean, need somebody who can sing and somebody who's good.
You're not looking at me. I can't sing.
Somebody who's brave and not scared of the politics and not scared to sing.
Absolutely. Raul, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. But of course, over to you for some final comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bob. And well, as I said earlier, all in all, it seemed to be a very good carnival. People were left with a good experience. And I'm saying this based on the feedback, based on the comments, based on what people who attended have been putting out there. I'm not seeing many views or many comments who say it was a bad experience for them. A lot of people seem to have come, accommodation. I hope when numbers come out that, the numbers are really high and the economic impact was really significant as well. Yes, there are some issues in terms of the quality of judging that I'm not happy about. I'm not going to attack any Calypsonian because that's not my style. I'm not attacking any Calypsonian. I'm not attacking scholar, but I'm concerned about the quality of judging, and we need to look at where we're wrong and where we're falling down. Because if people come together and put a good structure in place, then it means we must maintain that. We have to maintain the good things that we have, and so on. So the things that needs improving, I hope we can focus on that and improve it. But we are in a good place, in terms of our carnival, and our name is out there. A lot of people, from all through the Dominica, Trinidad, all through the region are commenting, and our carnival is really out there. Our artists are really out there as ambassadors and doing some great things. And I hope the positiveness continues, and I hope that more people come, and that 2026 is another good year, another bumper year, and I hope we solve all our challenges going forward. Good day, everybody.
Absolutely, Raul Titus. Thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Viewers and listeners, that was Raul Titus closing the first segment of the Bubb Report this week, and it's a bookend to a conversation on Carnival that we started last week with Dexter Mitchell, of course, the founder there of the Made in Grenada Festival. Dexter Mitchell, who also curated a list of cultural items and artifacts for Grenada's 50th anniversary of independence as well. Of course, Anthony Howard, of course, those who are coming into the room at this time, Anthony Howard is saying, I'm late to class, but was moving away from used motor oil to a more environmentally friendly alternative discussed. No, we did not discuss that, Anthony, but one of our guests, Ian Charles, who was supposed to be here from Jambalassi, Grenada, we will be having a future conversation with him about that, because he's one of the people in Grenada that is offering or has offered over the last 3 years or so an environmentally friendly charcoal option for to replace the oil oil for Juve morning. I personally do not have put oil oil on my skin because I have very sensitive skin, and then Grenadians cuss me and say, oh, you're playing a clean jab, this, that, and the third. But there's also another young lady, I believe, who's coming up with a lotion, a lotion that mimics the same jab consistency. So we'll be looking forward to that next year, and hopefully we'll have a full program on that as well. So yes, we did not address it, but we have another comment here from Ernesto Jose who's saying, what Scholar did for Calypso in Grenada, there is no one that comes close to him. Every year he manages 2 tents. Those who want to critique what they never did. You're saying that Titus is looking for attention. I do not know that he's looking for attention. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute to national conversations. I take exception when Grenadians say that people are looking for attention. With all due respect, Mr. Jose, Mr. Titus is exercising his constitutional right as a Grenadian citizen to express his view. Freedom of speech is enshrined in the Constitution. He has a right to do that. So those are some of the comments that we have. And of course, Margaret Francis, Margaret responding. Good morning, Margaret. It's good to have you again. Joining us on the Bubb Report as usual. You're saying cheating has always been a part of Caribbean exams. Technology has only made it easier and harder to detect. Absolutely. That's a very, very interesting way of thinking about it. And of course, just a quick roll call. We have author Langain joining us on the Bubb Report today. You're saying happy Sunday. Onika St. John is also here with us. Then we have Grenada Sunshine. Grenada Sunshine is also here with us today. Then we have Camille. That person's name is Camille, I believe it is, on the road from Toronto, Grenada Day. You went down to Toronto, it seems, for Grenada Day, and you're now commuting back to Montreal while you're listening to the Bubb Report. So thank you, and do drive safely. And I hope that you had a good time there at the Grenada Day activities in Toronto. And Onika is also telling us that today is actually Grenada Day, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique Day in Brooklyn, New York. So all of you Grenadians in Brooklyn, do enjoy that. I had my enough share of Carnival while I was in Grenada. So do enjoy all of that activities there. Jennifer Lawrence is saying, good morning, Dr. Bubb and everyone. Blessings all. It's good to have you, Miss Lawrence. So thank you for being an avid listener to the program. We also have Lizda Sawney. Lizda Sawney, of course, is joining us from Bowie, Maryland. Bowie, Maryland, of course, for those who don't know, Lizda Sawney is the sister of the great Nadia Benjamin, who, of course, was one of Grenada's first female ministers of government in the Eric Gary regime. Of course, Ms. Benjamin is still batting well in her upper 90s. So thank you all for watching the program and staying with us today. So, folks, what we will do now is take a quick break and come back for the second segment of the program. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Tell us, a commissioner of police, tell a politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively.
It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
What we need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, before we get to the panel segment of the week, we just want to get to three comments. Bob Marishow is saying, I saw all shows except one. The judging was reasonable, but some of my picks did not make it. Based on what I saw, it was Caller or someone else for the King. Some are saying that the young lady, Shireen, should have won the Dimanche Gras competition this year. And of course, we have Miss Agnes Henry. Good morning, Mr. Bubb. It's John McQueen's mom. Blessing, was so glad to meet you after all those years. Yes, Miss McQueen, it was good. Miss Henry, it was good to see you at the Mung Morris breakfast out there in Mung Morris. It was, you have not aged a day, ma'am. And thank you for watching for coming up to me and reminding me that you were John's mom. And of course, thank you for watching the Bubb Report and for being an avid. In fact, I met many of you over the Carnival festivities, and I thank you certainly for the compliments and of course for the constructive feedback and ways that we can grow and continue to maintain the quality that the Bubb Report has become known for. Now, Mr. Jose again is saying that Kayak Day in Seaview is free. You do not have to pay $20 as Grenada Day last week. I didn't even know that you had to pay for that. We've been duped by the Grenada Day promoters. Well, that's something I guess we'd have to look into, Mr. Jose. I did not know that there was a price of admission there. And Onika is responding by saying, well, the $20 is for the concert and entertainment and equipment. Now, let us get to the second segment of the program now. Now, as the 3 U.S. Navy destroyers and 3 amphibious warships moved toward the coast of Venezuela this weekend in an ostensible U.S. counter-narcotics operation, the regimes in Washington's show of force is rekindling memories of another presidency, another era, and another country. Now, in mid-December 1989, President George H.W. Bush ordered a military invasion of Panama, saying its leader at the time, Manuel Noriega, a one-time American ally and CIA informant, was a threat to the United States' interests in the Canal Zone and a corrupt general wanted on drug trafficking charges for turning his country into a narco state for Colombian cartels. Now, the operation was called Just Cause, and during that operation, U.S. troops not only used force, but blasted rock music, including songs by the band Guns N' Roses, as Noriega took sanctuary in the Vatican Embassy in Panama City. Now, Noriega surrendered on the 3rd of January 1990 and was whisked away to Miami, where he would later stand trial and be convicted and spend about 20 years in an American jail on charges of illegal and narcotic drug trafficking. Now, 2 South Florida lawyers, one who charged Noriega and another who defended him, say that it may look like the authoritarian in Washington has ripped a page out of the Panama playbook as U.S. naval forces veer towards the Venezuelan coast. Now, while the current regime claims to be America first, its military posture against Venezuela is anything but isolationist. Now, despite repeated public relations stunts, the America First despot in Washington did not bring the troops home or end endless wars. In fact, he consistently added fuel to the fire, increasing troop levels, deepening reliance on private military contractors, and dramatically scaling up aerial warfare in parts of the Middle East. Now, where an end to endless war requires repealing the 2001 and 2002 authorizations for the use of military force, he expanded conflicts under both. His last term and current term saw and continues to see consecutive years of growth of an already out-of-control Pentagon budget that did not suffer any cuts in this so-called big, beautiful bill that's meant to be a tax grab for the wealthiest Americans, and loosening even the minimal restrictions that were already in place. The so-called America First president expanded the United States' deadly and unaccountable drone wars across the world. Not only did he not end the wars he promised to, he worsened them, dropping more bombs, stoking further conflicts, undermining the prospects of peace, and massively increasing the rate of civilian deaths. Gaza is Exhibit A of that. And there are 2 important points of note here. Now, Washington has found an ally in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, who supports the military buildup in the Caribbean. Now, additionally, in May of this year, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil Pinto announced that the country was ready to grant BRICS member states priority access to its oil and gas projects. He said, quote, we are ready to work with all BRICS countries and open our country for investments from the member states of BRICS nations, unquote, and others but for BRICS as a priority. Now, he also noted that Venezuela is already actively cooperating with BRICS nations, including Russia, China, India, and South Africa, with companies from these countries currently investing in Venezuela's energy sector. So is this military buildup that's threatening the region's reputation as a zone of peace all about the so-called war on drugs? Or is it a pretext for another American military exercise in the Western Hemisphere? Now, here to discuss this are Jomo Thomas, former House Speaker and political analyst from St. Vincent and the Grenadines; David Abdullah, Trinidad and Tobago trade unionist, economist, politician, and political leader of the Movement for Social Justice. He also served as the General Secretary of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and was also part of Kamala Persad-Bissess's People's Partnership, which came together to contest the 2010 election in our neighbor to the south. And joining us from Guyana is Gerald Pereira, chairman of the Organization for the Victory of the People in Guyana. He's an educator, theologian, and a writer of liberation literature. Gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I believe, of course, Jomo Thomas, he's a returning guest, but Mr. Pereira and Mr. Abdullah, this is your first time on the Bubb Report, so we're happy to have you here, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Morning.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning to be here.
And Comrade Abdullah, it was such a pleasure meeting you in Grenada at that event for the mother of Malcolm X, that's Louise Langdon Little. It's such a pleasure having you on the platform. I did promise that there will be an opportunity for you to be invited on the platform, and here you are. So welcome.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bob. And I was listening to the previous segment, just to stick anecdotally.
Yes.
When I heard the name Royal Titus and you was talking about Carnival,
yes,
it reminded me that a couple of years ago, he passed away a couple of years ago, there was a Royal Titus who's Tobagonian, very involved in culture, and was a Calypsonian. Axback, I think, was his Calypso sobriquet. So I don't know if there was a Tobago and Grenada connection. But
maybe there is, but I'll let him know that. I will certainly let him know that. Now, gentlemen, this is certainly an important conversation to have. The region is now, again, thrust in the international spotlight in a way that I suspect the region does not want to be. But here we are. This idea that we're a zone of peace, I think, will all be upended. And really, have we been a zone of peace in America's backyard? Of course, Maurice Bishop said that, in nobody's backyard. But we are in the backyard of the world's, I would say, most destructive imperialist force, that we're seeing again, in spite of Trump saying that he's America first and he does not want endless wars. Here we are seeing the battle drums of war being beat. So I want to open with a general question, gentlemen, and any one of you can tackle this. The Caribbean as a zone of peace in this period of global volatility, are we next in respect of the instability that we have been seeing in Russia, Ukraine, the instability that we continue to see in the Middle East, and now we have these drumbeats of war here in our region, and some may say, well, these things are happening over there, it's not going to happen here, but it seems to have arrived at on our shores. Who wants to start?
Well, I think
Jomo.
If I may.
Yes.
This area has been a volatile area for centuries, beginning with the incursion of the Europeans 500 years ago. Civilizations were upended up and down the American continent, north and south, and all of the countries, islands in between. But certainly, beginning with the move towards independence in the 70s, 1972, the courageous action of manly of Jamaica, Barrow of Barbados, Bonham of Guyana, and Eric Williams of Trinidad, when they decided to recognize Cuba and to essentially put an important nail in the coffin of America's isolation of the Cuban Revolution. We saw that as an important move towards establishing the Caribbean, or to proclaim that the Caribbean was a zone of peace. More importantly, by the time the Grenada Revolution emerged in 1979 and Maurice Bishop and the New Jewel movement took up that position in St. George's, much more talk about the Caribbean not being anybody's backyard gained a lot of credence. But we may recall, and we recall tragically, that in 1983, regimes headed by Eddie Seaga, Tom Adams, and Eugenia Childs of Dominica brought, well, ostensibly invited the Americans in to put the final nail in the coffin of the Grenadian revolutionary experiment, coming on the heels of the implosion of the People's Revolutionary Government and the split in the New Jewel movement. So we had that situation there. And many persons had thought that we would be able to push back against the assaults, the incursion, the criminality, quite frankly, the banditry of the big colossus to the north. Because we saw, as you correctly said in the intro, what happened with Noriega in 1989. Well, not with Noriega, but with Panama in 1989. And the US, I think, always uses as a pretext some notion that try to demonize someone in order to use that as a pretext for getting in. You know, it is said that truth is the first casualty of war. But I think in a real sense, we can say truth is the first casualty of politics, because people are trying to stylize and to say whatever they want to say to make a position, and they're not always willing to stand with the truth. But certainly, I think that the way things are going now, we saw where the US on January 10th, in the dying days of the Biden administration, they placed a reward on President Maduro. And on August 7th, August 8th, I think, they placed up the reward by double the reward to $50 million on President Maduro. All of us who are closely understanding what has happened knows that the Americans use these things as a precept. There's not one shred of evidence that President Maduro is involved with drugs. At least no credible evidence has been brought to the fore. So I think that's the problem with what the Americans are doing. And I believe that it is significant that CARICOM came out. I saw a statement from Mia Mottley. I saw a statement from former Prime Minister Rowley, in which he said that he hopes that Mia Mottley would have a tongue and not have a pip. And well, she came back immediately to say that, look, I don't have nobody. I didn't leave my mouth in my mother, and they gave a very retrograde, in my mind, statement about what the people of Trinidad, and by extension the people of the Caribbean, can expect to see in the event that the Americans want to use Trinidad for any kind of assault against Venezuela. Certainly they're going to come with a pretext. Miss Passad Bissessa has indicated that she would go right along with it. So as an introductory point, I just wanted to say those things.
Yes, absolutely. Miss Comrade Abdullah, over to you, sir. Opening gambit, yes.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Jomo, for that overview. And the Caribbean has historically, Jomo is absolutely right, the Caribbean has historically been a theater of conflict. The Europeans fought endlessly over our islands. Tobago, for example, changed hands multiple times between many different colonial imperial powers. So, and there's a bay in Tobago called Bloody Bay because of the blood that was shed in a naval battle there. But the history of the 20th century is replete with it. So Haiti was occupied by U.S. troops on more than one occasion. Of course, Cuba, you had the Bay of Pigs attempt to overthrow the Fidel Castro revolution in the early 60s, and that was a U.S.-sponsored mercenary intervention. There's still an American base in Cuba, Guantanamo. Dominican Republic in 1965. Grenada was mentioned already. Jamaica, the 1980 elections, where clearly the Americans were involved and intervened, and the violence that took place in Jamaica in the lead up to the 1980 elections, which saw Michael Manley losing those elections. And of course, throughout Central America, Guatemala in '53 with Arbenz and so on, Honduras more recently with the lawfare there, El Salvador and Nicaragua. Let us never forget the Contra wars in El Salvador and Nicaragua, which were against, in the case of Nicaragua, the Sandinista government, in El Salvador against the Farbundi Mati liberation movement. And those Contra wars were financed by the drug trade. Yes, well-known information that the US financed the Contra wars with the drug trade and the profits of the drug trade. So when the Americans talk about narco trafficking, it's pure hypocrisy and duplicity. And when they seek, for example, to say that, there's a $50 million, $25 million by Biden, $50 million by Trump bounty on the head of President Maduro. Yet, on the other hand, Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, is welcomed with open arms in the White House and in the Congress. He addresses both houses of the US Congress, and there is a warrant out for his arrest by the International Criminal Court. Which International Criminal Court was the initiative, really, of former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, A.N.R. Robinson, who advocated for it and got it established through the Treaty of Rome. And of course, the International Court of Justice has also found Netanyahu and others in Israel guilty of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. So we have to call out the United States in terms of its colonial and imperial agenda, and to take a position on principle on these questions. And Joe made the point, there is no evidence whatsoever that is credible, and the United States has provided not a shred of evidence that President Maduro is involved in any drug trafficking or is part of any gang and so on. There's none of that. That's a lie which they use to get a narrative going, to justify. And it's really, we'll come back to that later on perhaps. But in Trinidad and Tobago,
Yes.
I'll make a statement in a short while.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
About what the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago said, because it was shameful and a sad day for Trinidad and Tobago, which has had a proud history over the years of taking a position in defense of sovereignty and non-intervention and standing up to imperial power when necessary.
Mm-hmm. And let me bring in Mr. Pereira. Of course, Ghana, of course, and the reason why we decided to get someone from Ghana and Trinidad is because both of your countries find yourselves in a very unique position here. Because notwithstanding the American aggression that we're seeing, that we've always seen historically, we've seen some Venezuelan aggression against Guyana. So, Mr. Pereira, welcome to the Bubb Report again. But in your opening, let us reflect on that sort of tension there between, of course, and a quick Google search finds me looking at how much military cooperation the government of Ghana is in fact having with the government of the United States against Venezuelan aggression. So let us talk about that tension there and that contradiction, if you will, there.
Well, first of all, I agree with you in your opening remarks that what played out in Panama and before and in Grenada, they're preparing to do the same thing. The U.S. imperialism is preparing to do the same thing in Venezuela. Now, I would like to say this, as someone who studied history, history speaks to us, but we can do two things. We can either listen to it or ignore it. And unfortunately, the majority of the Caribbean leaders refuse to listen to history. Our own Kwame Ture reminded us on numerous occasions that imperialism does not lie sometimes, it lies all the time. There are many, many instances that we can cite of where the empire has a history of lying, whether it's on Venezuela, whether it's on Iraq, whether it's on Syria, whether it's in Cuba, Libya. We've seen this. And they're consistent in lying, as Kwame Ture pointed out. It is sad, with the exception of just a few Caribbean leaders, the majority are happy to buy into the false narrative and lies of the U.S. empire. Now, the Guyana government issued a statement which sounds exactly like the one issued by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm getting the impression that it was drafted and given to them so that they can read it. What I'm seeing, and I'm as a Guyanese, as a patriot and a revolutionary nationalist, I am putting Caribbean governments who are prepared to bow, and let me be more specific, the Guyana government that speaks about sovereignty and territorial integrity, but it can be staring them in their face and they would not know what it is about. Now, when you listen to the statement that was issued by Guyana, it shows that the government is inept. It shows that it's a poor judgment of the reading of history, and it's actually a surrender of our sovereignty. I do not believe that Venezuela wants to invade Guyana, or that Venezuela has the ability to invade Guyana. Now, let me tell you what I'm talking about. The Venezuelan economy has been under sanctions for a number of years, and now it is recovering. Why would President Maduro want to invade Guyana or seek to invade Guyana when he knows that that is exactly what the U.S. empire would love? It's like giving them it on a platter.
No, but stick a pin here. Venezuela they've passed legislation essentially saying that Essequibo is theirs, right? Yeah. They have engaged in intimidatory military tactics. So while what the U.S. is doing, in essence, what I'm saying here is that on a smaller scale, Venezuela is replicating that type of imperialism in their own backyard.
No, well, let me be clear, because I don't want to be misread by people, right? I know people are trying that I am justifying or defending Venezuela. Let me tell you where I'm coming from.
Yes, please. Right?
I have pointed out on numerous occasions that some of the rhetoric that is coming out of Caracas is counterproductive and is not good. At the end of the day, Venezuela is our neighbor, and that dynamic, we cannot change it. We can't move Guyana to somewhere else or Venezuela to somewhere else. The point is this: if you look at the controversy, if you look at it, you examine the history of it, you will see that the United States has always batted for Venezuela against Guyana. The United States, when President Burnham, a champion in the non-aligned movement and a staunch anti-imperialist, was pursuing a non-capitalist path of development, recognized Cuba, as Jomo pointed out, allowed the Cuban planes to refuel in Guyana while they were flying to Angola. The United States sold F-16 fighters to Venezuela and was encouraging Venezuela to invade Guyana. Now that you have a different regime in Venezuela that the empire does not like, the empire is giving support to Guyana. Let it change tomorrow. Let the Bolivarian revolution is overthrown tomorrow. And then you will see what will happen. My point is this. Back to what Kissinger said. America has no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. I am saying that at the end of the day, yes, we have to sit down and talk. We still have to go back to the Geneva. We have to keep talking, because what I'm seeing and what is dangerous is that the United States is seeking to use not only Guyana, but Trinidad to launch their aggression against Venezuela. And then they will occupy both countries permanently. Look at what the US did in Iraq. The Iraqi parliament passed a number of resolutions to get the United States for the troops to leave. The popular mobilization brigades are shooting rockets at the US bases to get them out, and the US would not leave. The US occupied parts of Syria, main areas, the oil fields of Syria under the Assad regime, and was looting their oil. So what I'm saying is we have to be careful. Yes, I do not agree. I've never supported the rhetoric that is coming out of Caracas in relation to Essequibo. I do believe that Essequibo belongs to Guyana. And once something is out of the womb, it cannot be stuffed back. But I'm exposing the double standards and the hypocrisy of the United States and the West. As Brother Abdallah pointed out, Netanyahu, for 2 years now, Israel is committing genocide. Thousands are dying. Children are being directed to food areas to collect food, and they're being shot. And not the entire world cannot rein in Netanyahu or Israel. But yet, in less than 2 days, they passed resolutions to bomb Iraq and to overthrow the Libyan Jamahiriya under Muammar Gaddafi. This is what we are dealing with. Trump is a barefaced deceiver. What we are seeing is the naked fascism of Trump. And that fascism has replaced the friendly fascism of the Democratic Party. Because Malcolm X understood the nature of both of these parties. He described one as the wolf and one as the fox. The strategy and tactics differ, but the objective is the same: to devour you. And when I listen to our politicians, they're an absolute disgrace. They are prostrating themselves before imperialism. And those who are allowing the Americans to dispatch destroyers, the destroyers into our region, is a betrayal of all that our ancestors fought for. Be it Macandal, Coffee, Garvey, Nani, all of those resistance fighters, the captured Africans. It's a betrayal of our sovereignty. Now, let me just end by saying this quickly. Yes. The Monroe Doctrine. When you examine the Monroe Doctrine, our leaders need to study it. The Monroe Doctrine is a racist doctrine. It's an element of white supremacy. There was a U.S. senator who died in 1927, Albert J. Beveridge. He said that the Anglo-Saxon people, and he was speaking about the Anglo-Saxon leadership in the United States at the time, that they have the divine right, this God-given right to civilize those in the backyard. America, using the Monroe Doctrine, America has never, ever recognized the sovereignty and independence of any country in its so-called backyard. Never. And that is why the pussyfoot years and years, decade before they give some sort of formal recognition to the Haitian independence, the sovereignty of Haiti, the Haitian people. So Trump is putting new life into the Monroe Doctrine, the backyard. But when there was the war over the Malvinas, the Falkland War between Argentina, the generals, who the U.S. supported many of them, and the U.S. was happy to use them in the anti-communist activities, but then they got weary of them because the U.S. found out they were more interested in narcotics. The U.S. moved them to other places in South America to destabilize progressive regimes. So the Monroe Doctrine, when the British went in to fight the war that lasted for a number of days with Argentina, America didn't tell the British, well, you can't come into our backyard. They're all Anglo-Saxons. They're allowed for that. But when it comes to those who we seek as allies, be it China or Russia or Iran or India or anybody who that constitute BRICS or the non-aligned movement, whatever where it is today, the Monroe Doctrine is invoked. And our leaders, and I'm going to say this, our leaders, with few exceptions, are nothing but, and I'm going to use a very strong term that was used by the Chinese revolutionary leader Mao Zedong, running dogs of imperialism. That's what they are. And I make no apology for that. I'm not a diplomat. I'm a revolutionary. I speak truth to power. And the truth is subversive and the truth is radical.
Jomo, let me bring you back here. Of course, you're an attorney. You sit in Vincentian courts. You defend clients. You know how the legal system works. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because according to the United States and according to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, there is a narcotics problem in the Caribbean that needs to be dealt with. And they're identifying Venezuela as one of the sources of that narcotics problem. Now, and of course, we have seen that laid bare in respect of, and now speaking of the justice system, where young men in particular are brought on different drug charges and things like that, whether it's trafficking in cocaine, marijuana, or other illicit substances across the region. Now, one may say that the region does in fact have that problem, but do you think in the context of what the United States is doing, do you think that there is some credence to that point as well, notwithstanding the bigger militaristic, imperialistic picture that we see here?
Now, of course, there's a drug problem, not only in Latin America, across the Caribbean, and indeed much of the world. There is a drug problem. The question is, who is one of the biggest protagonists of the drug problem? Who? Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar, in 1999, Gary Webb wrote a book, Dark Alliance, the CIA, the Contras, and the crack cocaine explosion, in which he detailed the ways in which the CIA, and I think, Brother Bobby, you pointed to it at the beginning, the CIA, or it might have been Brother Abdullah, stole crack, destroyed the communities in the United States, and used that money to fund the Contras against a revolutionary government in Nicaragua. The same happened with the British and the Americans in China. So we have to watch that pattern and watch that history. In Panama, they used Noriega for many years. In fact, it was said that Noriega was used to get rid of Torrijos, who was the revolutionary leader of Panama. They used him and then they abused him. In the same way in which they used Saddam Hussein against when the Iranian Revolution emerged. They used them, they had them to fight a disastrous war in which millions of Iraqis and Iranians were killed, and then they turned around and killed Saddam Hussein. So this whole thing of law, you know, there's warfare and there's lawfare. We saw it with the removal of Lula in Brazil, the use of lawfare. We saw it with the removal of the next leader who came in after Lula. What was his name? Dulaf, I think. What's her name?
Dilma Rousseff.
Dilma Rousseff. Yes.
Right. We saw it with her. We saw it with the removal of the what was then called Obama's first coup of the president of Honduras in 2009. So there's a pattern that is replicated all over the world. Anytime the leaders of the powerful countries, the US and the European Union, want to remove someone, they come up with some kind of argument. The thing is not grounded in law. In the first place, to invade a country goes against international law, because international law says that you have to trigger in the United Nations Security Council certain article, I think it's Article 9. But look what the US has always done. And I think that Brother Pereira makes the point that for them, there's nothing about law in what they perceive as their backyard. They intervene at will. And Brother Abdullah went through from Guatemala in 56, Dominican Republic in 65, Chile in 73, the Manly period between 76 and 1980. The origin of the gun problem today in Jamaica can be found with the efforts of the CIA to overthrow Michael Manley when he emerged as the leader in 1980. So this whole notion of law and you have to, when you are revolutionary, they tell you that you need to have an election to show your democratic bona fides. Do you hear them say that about Saudi Arabia? That ended slavery in 1968? Do you hear them say that about all of those United Arab Emirates and all of those countries? So the issue, look, imperialism is just deceitful, insidious, and in many respects, as Martin Luther King said, as early as when he did the speech, why I oppose the war in Vietnam, he made the point that the US is the most aggressive warmongering nation in the world. That was April, I think it was April 1968. It was a day or a week before he was assassinated, he made those comments. So the use of law, there's nothing in law which justify the Americans doing what they're doing. And it is unfortunate that so many countries across the region, they are either quiet or we see, as in the case of Guyana and Trinidad, they are willing to carry water for the United States and to do things that are not in the interest of the people of the Caribbean.
And I want us to stick a pin there on the whole CARICOM and non-aligned movement question. That, again, history would record that during the period of the Grenada Revolution, for example, that South-South solidarity was extremely strong. Yes, you had that reliance on each other in the context of the non-aligned movement, which of course was sort of an extension of the post-colonial project that we saw in the global south. I do not like to use the word third world because the word third world in and of itself is a derogatory racist term as well. But Comrade Abdullah, I want to get to you here on the Trinidad and Tobago question. Now, you were in fact a member of Kamala Persaud's People's Partnership administration. Of course, you eventually left that People's Partnership. You came together, and historically in Trinidad and Tobago, the United National Congress has always allied with organized labor. Of course, you are the president of the Oilfield Workers trade union organization there. That current posture, that Kamala Persaud says, so in fact, when Donald Trump won, she went out on a limb and she praised him. She praised him, this sort of a dear leader type praising. I was very shocked, quite frankly, at her statement, but some folks said I should not have been surprised. But let us talk about her current posture and the role that Trinidad and Tobago might be playing, and of course, your reaction to all of that.
Yeah, sure. So just for the accurate historical record, yes, the party of which I was one of the leading members and then became the leader of, we were part of the People's Partnership from 2010 to 2012. And in June of 2012, I withdrew the MSJ as the leader of the party, withdrew it from the People's Partnership government, and I resigned as a senator. So we left the government in 2012. The government remained for another 3 years thereafterwards. And it was because of issues that we had within the partnership that we were not happy with, and which the leadership of the partnership failed to address in terms of keeping faith with the commitments that we made in our manifesto and other public documentation. Now, I retired from the Oilfields Workers Trade Union as General Secretary, having served in various positions for 39 years. But I retired 9 years ago in 2016. Okay. So I am not now
an active member.
An active
for the
leader
record,
of the trade union movement. I mean, I have relations with the unions because of my long historical role in the labor movement and so on, but I'm not a member of the leadership team or play any role in the decision-making of the unions. I solely focus on my political work and my other regional and international work. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I made a statement on Thursday on this issue of the U.S. military intervention, very clear statement on this issue. And I called on CARICOM to take a stand on the question, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago government. Now, let me just say several things. One is in relation to CARICOM, that CARICOM is now, at the point has been made, I think, very deeply divided on this question. So a number of CARICOM member states are members of ALBA TCP, and there was a summit of the ALBA TCP a few days ago, I think on Wednesday, and there's a statement coming out, and so the governments of St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Grenada, I believe, St. Kitts as well, who are members of ALBA, came out with a strong statement in support of the position in defense of the Bolivarian government of Venezuela and condemning the U.S. military intervention. So there's CARICOM is split, but this is not unusual for Trump, because when in Trump 1.0, he also divided CARICOM when he had a meeting with some CARICOM leaders at his place in Florida and so on, and the prime ministers or the leaders from Guyana, Haiti, Bahamas, Jamaica, St. Lucia at the time, different party, went there, and they then supported what was known as the Lima Group, which included the US and Canada and some backward Latin American governments that were gunning after President Maduro and seeking to install Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela in the OAS and elsewhere. So CARICOM got divided, and CARICOM was deeply divided in 1983 with the US invasion, because there was a CARICOM heads of government, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, George Chambers at the time, was the chair of CARICOM, and there was a CARICOM head summit at the Hilton Hotel in Port of Spain after Morrison and the other martyrs were killed on October 19th, but prior to the US invasion. And CARICOM was, under Chambers' leadership, was seeking to have a CARICOM process to engage HA and the others in Grenada, CORD and the others and so on, and seek to have that whole process come to an end in terms of that, the Revolutionary Military Council, whatever it was called, and to have a different type of governance arrangement in Grenada. So CARICOM was seeking to do that. And while they were doing that, meeting at the Hilton, Tom Adams and Eugenia Childs stepped out of the room to talk to the US State Department, and Eugenia left Trinidad and went to Washington to stand next to Reagan as part of OEC, as she claimed, to justify the invasion. So CARICOM was deeply divided on that question, and it is deeply divided now. So the US seeks, when it has its own agenda, to deeply divide CARICOM, and this is not good. And the statement by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, I'm going to call her out in an MSA media statement shortly, said, and I'm quoting from a statement now, the Trinidad and Tobago government has not matter. Each member state can speak for themselves on this issue. Now, that is a horrible statement, because in the Treaty of Chaguaramas provides and specifies that with respect to foreign relations, international relations, CARICOM should have a common position and collaboration and so on in terms of policy and in terms of decision making. So that's a horrible statement by the Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister, and particularly in the context where just a week ago the U.S. government sanctioned the finance minister of Grenada and said he no longer has visa access and so on to the access to the United States. All his visas have been cancelled because of the position of Grenada, and other CARICOM countries have the same situation of the Cuban medical brigades in our countries, which brigades are assisting our people, our citizens, with medical care and attention in a very important way. So this is a major issue for CARICOM. And when I just want to come to the issue of drug interdiction, and I agree with what Jomo said a while ago, but let me add that there is active collaboration. Let's not forget, there is active collaboration between the United States, and not only the US, but the colonial powers of France, Britain, and Holland, who have colonies in our region, and CARICOM governments. With respect to drug interdiction, there are joint exercises, and the US Coast Guard collaborates with our military assets and so on in drug interdiction. And, so there was a big drug bust in Spain recently of cocaine that left Trinidad and so on, and the DA was part of that because there are DA officers here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I suspect in many CARICOM member states, together with Trinidad and Tobago intelligence and so on, and Spanish authorities. And the Coast Guard, US Coast Guard, regularly seizes drugs in this region. But that is drug interdiction. That is about policing. That is about engaging in criminal activities. Now, when you send 3 destroyers with misguided missiles on it, when you send a nuclear submarine and 3 other naval assets, some that have the capacity to have helicopter attack helicopters take off and land on those vessels, and 4,000 Marines. That has nothing to do with interdiction, okay? That is an offensive military capability. And we must make the point, an offensive military capability is very different from US Coast Guard cutters and our Coast Guard vessels or whatever, and police and so on, engaging in drug interdiction. The two are completely different types of military assets or defense assets, as the case may be. This is an offensive military set of assets that have been assembled and have been sent into the Southern Caribbean, and that is not about drug interdiction. One of the things that concerns me, it could be saber rattling, or it could be to impose a blockade, a naval blockade on Venezuela, as the United States did. Let's not forget our history. The United States imposed a naval blockade on Nicaragua during the Sandinista government, the first Sandinista government, and that had a major economic impact on Nicaragua. So already with US sanctions on Venezuela, if they impose a naval blockade, it means that ships from China and elsewhere that are doing trade with Venezuela might be blocked, or there may be an incident which could provoke another whole dimension of conflict in our region. And a naval blockade of Venezuela would also be legal because it has nothing to do, as Jomo said, with any decision of the United Nations, and therefore will be contrary to international law. And so all of this is major. And the last thing about the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago's statement is that she said that she would allow US troops, let me quote it accurately, I wish to make it very clear that if the Maduro regime launches any attack against the Guyanese people or invades Guyanese territory, and a request is made by the American government for access to Trinidadian territory to defend the people of Guyana, my government will unflinchingly provide them that access. Now, this whole issue of those naval assets and so on have nothing to do with Venezuela going into Guyana, and I agree 100% with Jared on that. Venezuela is not going to invade Guyana. We support, and let me make the point clear, that we support the position of Guyana as a CARICOM member state and so on. And we also supported publicly and congratulated the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines, who happened at the time to be the chair of CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, for his intervention that resulted in the Argyle Accord, which took down the tensions. And it was very unfortunate, in my view, for President Maduro to, and I've said this to the Venezuelans and so on, for him to have ratcheted that up prior to the last elections. But I understood that to be in the context of electoral politics within Venezuela, because the issue of Essequibo is an issue for Venezuelans quite separate and apart from anything else. So I understood that in terms of the internal politics of Venezuela, but it was never, in my view, going to lead to Venezuela engaging in an actual takeover of the Essequibo. And we continue to support the kind of process that was established by Argyle Accord for discussion between Guyana, Venezuela, Brazil, because President Lula played a role, Comrade Ralph and others in this regard, the United Nations Secretary General and others in this regard, and insist that the Caribbean be a zone of peace. We do not wish to see another Panama 89. We do not wish to see another Grenada 83, Dominican Republic 65, or the Bear Pigs in Cuba, or any of the other military interventions that have taken place in this region. We want to be left alone to pursue our own development on the basis of our own interests.
And I'm glad that there is an issue here that you raised, and we will get to that about the military blockade or potential military blockade, which has occurred. But Mr. Pereira, and of course I'm going to bring in Jomo here as well on this question, and that concerns the whole idea of the impacts and implications. I mean, we've seen wherever there is American military involvement that there tends to be instability that follows that military involvement wherever they go. We saw that in Iraq and what unfolded there, you know. So let us talk about the on-the-ground economic, socioeconomic, political implications of any kind of heightened American military activity in the region. And I do want to later tie that to the whole question of BRICS, because there is an interesting tea leaf here on the question of BRICS. Is this a case where the U.S. seeing what the pivot away from the U.S. now, given everything that they're doing with their economic leverage, right, in respect of the sanctions and all of that. But let us first talk about that question of potential instability that can emerge as a result of any type of military action in Venezuela. I mean, we've seen the instability that has already occurred with respect to the mass migrations of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans. And of course, I made the point before that we would not have seen that question of instability in Venezuela had there not been sanctions placed on it by the United States. So context also matters. But let us talk about that. Brother Pereira, I want to begin with you on that question.
Well, brother, first of all, I would like to say this quickly on 3 points.
Yes.
Brother Abdallah mentioned the Argyle Accord. I was told by a diplomat that when Prime Minister Gonzalez was making the arrangements for President Ali and President Maduro to meet in St. Vincent, there was tremendous pressure was being put on Prime Minister Gonzalez, Prime Minister Skerrit, not to hold that meeting. In other words, there are those who do not want to see Venezuela and Guyana talking. Those people want a war. And they want to use our territorial controversy, right, as an excuse, right? In fact, I believe that the United States and their agencies are deliberately feeding misinformation and lies to the government of Guyana. I honestly believe this. I think the intention is their intention is to build the tension up to such a point where you have an open war between the two countries, right? Now, something interesting happened, I think, more than a year ago now. Many of you would have heard about it. A helicopter with some senior military personnel from the Guyana Defense Force went down. That black box was sent to the United States. It's more than a year, and we cannot hear anything about that black box. The press is not asking questions about it. It is very secretive. Up to now, we cannot hear from the government of Guyana about the black box and what happened. So I am saying there is very satanic forces at work, and I'm going to use that word because I like the term when Ayatollah Khomeini spoke of the great Satan, the deceiver. And this is what we are witnessing, the lies and the deception. Now, the other thing I want to say is that the US, Trump, is hell-bent on going after China. And he's putting pressure on governments in the region to scale down their economic and other sort of trade and trade and economic relations with the People's Republic of China. We're seeing this. Marco Rubio came into Guyana, and the way he spoke, Rubio spoke like he was the overseer. He came in, and the president stood there next to him, and you know, you only had to look at the dynamics the way they were. You know, the president standing there next to Rubio, and Rubio behaved as though Guyana is a colony of the United States. And we are people, our people, we have leaders, misleaders, who are actually proceeding in that direction. Yet they talk about territorial integrity, sovereignty, and independence. These people do not know what constitutes true independence, meaningful independence, what our national dignity is about. And they're prepared to allow themselves to be bullied by Trump. Let me tell you what happened to me last year. I spoke at one rally in solidarity with the Palestinian people and spoke out against the genocide. I've written extensively on it. And I was leaving the next month, last year, October. I was departing Georgetown on a British Airways flight that was stopping Castries, St. Lucia, and on to Gatwick, and then I would go on. When I got to the airport, the British Airways counter staff told me I could not board the flight. They told me that the U.S. border security said I cannot go on the plane. So I replied by saying, what U.S. border security has to do with this? I'm not traveling or to the U.S. or in transit. They said, no, but the plane is flying over U.S. territory. So the British Airways said, look, this man purchased his ticket and so on. He should go. They said to the British Airways counter staff management in Georgetown that if you put Mr. Pereira in the flight, we'll stop the plane from departing Cheddi Jagan Airport. This is meant to be a sovereign nation state. I went to see the foreign minister the next day and told him, and he sat like I was talking an alien language. We are dealing with cowards, and the Americans are a bunch of bullies and thugs who are prepared to bully small nation states like in the Caribbean. That is what they're doing. And few leaders are prepared to stand up to them. Gone are the days when we had the Forbes, Burnham and Errol Barrows and Manley that stood up to these bullies. We are voluntary, we are prostrating ourselves before them. And this is about breaking part of the whole thing with Trump. He's applying pressure, right? Because Rubio came into Guyana and criticized and attacked the Chinese, what the Chinese have been given and doing for Guyana over the years. Rubio did this. The other thing I want to say to you, my dear brother, Dr. Bob, is you use the term imperialism in reference to Venezuela. Just for the records, I'd like to correct this. That's an unscientific use of the word, because imperialism, Brother Abdallah, as a political economist, would agree, is monopoly capitalism. It's monopoly capitalism backed by military power. For there to be for a country to be an imperial power or a country to be imperialist, there must be a nation state that is subjugated by that power. And that nation state's resources is extracted for the benefit of that imperial power. Walter Rodney made that crystal clear in how Europe wanted to develop Africa. And there's a lot of that. So to speak of Venezuelan imperialism is unscientific. We can speak of Venezuelan aggression. You can use that the language, I've said it on numerous occasions, that the rhetoric that is coming out of Caracas, I find it counterproductive. It's not helpful to dialogue. And it plays into the hands of our common enemy, which is imperialism, because the imperialists don't give a damn about Venezuela and they don't give a damn about Guyana. It's all about taking control of our oil and gas wealth. And we know that Venezuela has tremendous amount of oil and gas reserves.
Yes. So let us now go on to talk, and I'm going to bring Jomo. I'm not sure if Jomo wants to add anything here. But or Dr. Abdullah, but I do want to now raise the question of BRICS. Of course, we have been seeing that I suppose justifiable pivot away from the United States. Of course, the United States are under its current leader, under its current dear leader, if you will, has indicated that they are going to be engaging in this sort of trade war with the rest of the world, pretty much, right? Sanctions and all of that, economic pressure, putting economic pressure to bear, and while not giving anything, of course, the soft power programs, and you gentlemen may disagree with my framing of a USA program as soft American power, but some may say that it's also was used and has been used as sort of a subversive activity in countries as well. But we are now seeing the pivots towards BRICS, and I'm wondering out loud here, and Dr. Abdullah, you referenced this naval blockade, but I'm wondering how much of this new age American aggression is all about our pivot away from having to treat with economic activity with the United States, given how punitive that has turned out to be towards like trading amongst ourselves. Of course, recently in Grenada, we've also seen which was the fourth installment of the African Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum that occurred in Grenada as well, again, which was meant to get away from a lot of the US systems. How much of this has to do with America reacting to that pivot away from its economic systems?
Thank you very much. And
yes.
You're the only doctor here. I don't have a doctorate.
Yes, no.
Okay.
I do not pretend to know everything either, and that's why I always bring experts here. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so, but seriously, though, what we're seeing right now is the decline of the US as the single hegemonic power in the world. And that is because of several factors. The rise of China, both in terms of the size and rapid growth of its economy, its huge advances in technology. China now is really further advanced than the United States in many areas technologically, including AI and a whole range of other things like that. And also China as a military power. We must never discount the fact that China is also a significant military power. So together with that, you have the countries of the global south with the BRICS initiative, and many other countries seeking to align themselves with the BRICS. So you're seeing countervailing power to the US. And from time to time, you see conflicts between the US and the Europeans as well. And clearly, when Biden said, after he became president, that America is back, it didn't simply mean that America was going to reestablish good relations with Europe and NATO and all of that. He meant that America was back as a hegemon. That is really the intention, right? And similarly, Trump is now seeking to try to ensure America first is about trying, not just in terms of an internal focus, in terms of the issues within the United States and so on, but also trying to ensure that the United States is the single hegemon in the world, because I think Jared or somebody made that point, or Joe, I'm not sure who, about really the US wanting to engage China. Yes, they engage as a principal, quote unquote, power that they want to bring down. So their aggressiveness in this part of the region is about that, to try to ensure that Latin America and the Caribbean remains their backyard under their full control. And left and progressive political movements and social movements in Latin America, less so in the Caribbean, but in Latin America, have been moving in a different direction. So you have Mexico, and I'm not now going to analyze each country has a different political dynamic, and we could argue and squabble about which is left and which is not doing well and so on. But Latin American countries, whether it's Lula in Brazil or the AMLO and now Sheinbaum in Mexico and other countries in Latin America, are trying to establish different relations and deal with their country's problems from a standpoint of not kowtowing to U.S. Imperialism. And so Trump is vexed with Brazil and wants to impose a 50% tariff on Brazil. Why? Because the Brazilian justice system has Jair Bolsonaro under trial for engaging in criminal activity. And Trump believes that because he and Bolsonaro are friends and fellow neo-fascists, that he could now impose tariffs on Brazil to aid his political friend and ideological companion. So you're seeing that kind of activity happening. Look what happened when if I was Cyril Ramaphosa, I would not have gone to the White House to have been subjected to that.
Well, that was quite embarrassing, wasn't it? Wasn't that embarrassing? That was really sad. And you know,
and Ramaphosa.
Go ahead, Dr. Mr. Abdullah. Yes, please.
Yeah, Ramaphosa, who was one of the most militant leaders in the struggle against apartheid, leading the trade union movement, right? At the time, the labor movement in South Africa. It was very, very, very distressing to have seen him in that kind of situation. But South Africa has maintained its position on the question of genocide by Israel. It has maintained its position within BRICS and so on, and has spoken out against tariffs and other things like that. India, surprisingly, because Modi and Trump were supposed to be quite close and so on, India is being penalized for engaging in trade with Russia by buying Russian oil. And it's very strange because Prime Minister Modi was recently in Trinidad and Tobago and had a very close relationship with Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. And so, on the one hand, you know, Prime Minister Trinidad and Tobago cozying up to Trump and with Modi at the same time, but you can't do both because, you know, the US wants Modi to disengage with BRICS. So, yes, we have to look south and with BRICS and with Western Africa and with Africa in general and the engagement with the AU. There are many problems in Africa, but the engagement with Western Africa and so on in terms of trade is going to be very important, and with Latin America. So there is a geopolitical war going on in terms of technology, in terms of economic power, and ultimately it's going to get to a military conflict in one way or the other. And we in the Caribbean, therefore, that is another reason why we have to insist that the Caribbean be a zone of peace.
Let me bring in Jomo here. Jomo, any thoughts on that? Again, and we have seen this in the past with United States policy. I mean, we saw this in Chile as well. You know, anytime there is that sort of, anytime countries attempt to assert their own economic independence, some pretext is created for war, and some pretext is created for putting them in check using the big stick of American militarism. Jomo.
Yes, Dr. Bob, I think that we need to look at what is happening and the emergence of BRICS, because I saw some statistics recently that said with some the current members and the persons who want, the countries that want to join, if all of them were to join, these countries would make up like about 52%, within their borders would be 52% of the world's most strategic minerals and resources that allow for the propulsion of the society. So that is one of the things. And remember at the recent BRICS summit in Brazil, Trump immediately after the summit that says any country that appears to be entering into alliances or agreements that are sconce to the U.S. Position, U.S. dominance, U.S. interests, that country would be pressured. And it's out of that, we saw all of these sanctions which Trump decided to bring and to impose on much of the world. But that strategy is an old strategy, though. We can go all the way back to 1970, 1971. Remember, after Nixon became the president of the United States in 1968, by 1971, they had what they termed the rapprochement. It was Kissinger and Nixon and Chow and Lai. the Deputy Premier and Foreign Minister of China at the time, where they had that rapprochement, and China, and it was intended to break up the world communist movement and the world socialist bloc. They succeeded in doing that because China then became, at least in rhetoric, a big enemy of the Soviet Union. And all of those fissures, all of those divisions contributed to the friction, the disunity in the world communist movement, in the world socialist bloc, resulted in what they called the Orange Revolutions in Hungary and Czechoslovakia and Poland and so on. And that, in the end, that resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990, 1991. But importantly, so what we are seeing now, that section of the US ruling class, which Trump represents, wants a rapprochement with Russia. Look how the tables are turning up. Back then in the 70s, it was a rapprochement with China. Now they perceive China to be on the ascendancy, and China is the most dominant of these societies. So Trump section of the ruling class, that section of the ruling class that Trump represents, wants to have a rapprochement with Russia to see if they can do and further encirclement of China. And that is all that we see playing out there. And this is why the other section of the American ruling class try to say that, oh, Trump is a Russian poodle and Trump is a Russian asset and so on. That's the tension that we are seeing there. But to get for countries like ours, it's really a sad situation, because I want to go back. My brother Abdullah touched it tangentially, but I want to go back to show how these divisions really affect the movement, at least on issues of sovereignty and territorial integrity and so on. Because in I think it was in November of 2020. Remember, was it 2020? Yeah, I think it was November of 2020. President Maduro was reelected in 2018. The Americans and the European Union hoist Juan Guaido on the people. And there was an OAS meeting, and Jamaica, Haiti, and Bahamas voted against Trinidad, because remember, Guaido was accusing Trinidad and Tobago of not helping to save some refugees that apparently perished in international waters. But with the support of the Americans, they claimed that the Trinidadians had not done enough. And at the meeting of the OAS, 3 Caribbean countries who had committed under the Treaty of Chaguaramas to work and to coordinate their foreign policy broke relations then, broke rank and supported Guaido, who was an unelected imposition by the Americans. So it is unfortunate to see Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar acting in the ways in which she's acting, because 5-6 years ago, Trinidad came under the same kind of pressure. But I know some of these leaders are not very good. They don't understand history. They play to their own interests at the expense of the national development of their countries. And these are the kind of challenges we have. I am hoping that the next generation, because I think our generation has really, and the generation before, has really not done a good job in terms of asserting our independence, our sovereignty, the struggle for a clear ideological understanding as to where the country's world is going and where we need to line up. So we now, all of us on this show, Brother Bob, you appear to be the youngest of us, but certainly we have to prepare that next generation, that next cadre of Caribbean nationals, Caribbean professionals, who would be prepared, as Michael Manley said, to stand on our feet and not our knees.
Well, you're talking about the next generation, but unfortunately, if you're looking at this new generation of Caribbean leaders, where is the backbone? Where is the backbone that we saw with Maurice Bishop, with all of the post-colonial leaders who really put the Caribbean in a place? I remember, meeting members of the Bird family from Antigua and Barbuda who used their homes to as places of rescue for the apartheid fighters, right? We gave passports to the anti-apartheid fighters during that period, right? Cuba sent troops to Angola to fight apartheid. What is this generation of leaders doing, right? In Grenada, a minister makes a statement and the opposition condemns the minister for making a statement that they're okay with getting their visa canceled, and that's a big thing there, But where are we going? I mean, gentlemen, any thoughts on that last point? That according to quote Dr. Rowley, our cuckoos are cooked, if you will. Brother Pereira.
Well, I just want to say something in passing quickly.
Yes.
My area of concentration expertise has been reading the revealed texts or religious texts or even the text or oral tradition from a liberatory perspective.
Yes.
And I just with my brother Abdallah, I did a doctorate in philosophical theology, focusing on that, reading religious texts from a liberatory perspective, because I do believe that all those who came, all the prophets were prophet revolutionaries. Having said that, I just want to mention this that was in relation to what Brother Abdallah said earlier about the narcotics. Most of the narcotics that enters the United States comes from Asia, and it finds its way through Mexico and up to the United States. I attended a talk by a retired former Lieutenant Colonel Bo Gritz, and he told his audience that he was brought up in the diet believing that the enemy was outside of America, only to find out later that the enemy was inside, because he went to what was called that triangle, the area around Myanmar, Burma, Cambodia, and so, and he found what was happening. Anyhow, they transferred him to the border with Nicaragua at the time with the Contras and so, and he was able to see that there was aircraft bringing in the drugs. So, getting back to what Brother Abdallah pointed out and Brother Juma, the CIA has been the biggest movers of narcotics. They've used it to finance groups, counter-revolutionary groups, neo-Nazi groups, and terrorist groups to overthrow progressive and revolutionary nationalist regimes. That's one. The tariffs we get now, the other point I want to make is about Trump imposing all of these tariffs and so. Anyone would tell you that the economy, the US economy, the consumers are suffering from these heavy tariffs. The US cannot win the trade war with China. They cannot win the trade war with China. And hence the US is pushing. You see they're trying to build an alliance in the Pacific in certain parts there, Southeast, with Philippines and around Taiwan, with a number of countries, for a war with China. That's what Trump is pushing. So Trump is hoping for peace with Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, so that he can focus his attention on China. That is what it's all about here. Good. But what we are witnessing, Kwame Nkrumah said that neocolonialism was the final stage of imperialism. What we are seeing is imperialism in its most vicious and hostile phase. I think the empire is going down. There's resistance to it. There's mass resistance. You only have to see what is taking place across the globe. You look at what's happening in Britain. In Britain, to carry a sign saying that the genocide in Gaza, you can be prosecuted. More than 400 students in Columbia University were denied their degrees. Those who completed bachelor's, master's, and doctoral studies were denied their degrees. In the United States, if you call for boycott against any company for doing business with Israel, with the apartheid state of Israel, you can be fined $1 million and be placed in prison for 20 years. So if this is not naked fascism, or it's not fascism, then tell me what is fascism.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me bring in Mr. Abdullah, because gentlemen, we do have to close the program. This is such an important topic that we will be here on the Bubb Report. What we try to do is to really treat with those serious issues that are affecting not only Grenada but the Caribbean. But there is a question of Cuba here. And again, gentlemen, who is to say that the U.S. is not in a perfect position right now to not only get rid of the Maduro regime in Venezuela, but to also get rid of, and it's been a fever dream of the neocon Secretary of State because he's part of the Cuban, the white, and I want to be very specific, the white Cuban expat community in Miami, who has been advocating for decades the dissolution of the Cuban revolutionary experiment. So who is to say that now, given how tied up Russia is with the war in Ukraine, given the fact that other Brits, that there is no appetite for militarism at this point by many countries, and while China, yes, has an economic interest in the region, China is not one, at least, to exercise that kind of militaristic power that the United States tend to exercise. So who is to say that they're not going to invade Cuba next, after Venezuela?
Yes, a very good point. It even could be before, one never knows. You're absolutely right. Sorry, you're absolutely right. And Marco Rubio is not only Secretary of State, but he's also, excuse me, he's also the acting national security advisor. So he controls a huge amount of power within the U.S. administration, and of course he's comes out of the Miami community of Cuban Americans who have been extremely hostile, violently so, against the Cuban Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very important point that you have made, and thank you for bringing that up. And so the issue of solidarity at this moment has to be with Venezuela, but it also has to be Cuba and with Haiti, because one of Trump's friends, we've called it what they want, Eric Prince with his mercenary group, is now in Haiti or about to enter Haiti, supposedly to deal with the gang violence and so on, when the arms and the money that have enabled the gangs to become as strong as they are have all come out of the United States, yes, and have been supported by the US and so on as part of the destabilization of Haiti. So we have to be very concerned as a region right now, and once again insist that we are a zone of peace. And let me just say that this Thursday, the Assembly of Caribbean People, which was started many, many decades ago, but which still functions and so on, of which I'm a member of the Regional Executive Committee, we're going to be having a regional press conference in 3 languages, English, French, and Creole perhaps, and Spanish. And we'll be issuing a couple of major statements on Thursday on this whole issue of U.S. militarization, U.S. imperialism, and the sovereignty of the region, and for us to be a zone. So I'll share that information with you, everyone who's on this call. And we also want to make a call, which we'll announce on Thursday, for many Caribbean individuals and organizations to sign on to a declaration at this time, so that the Caribbean people themselves, not only the leaders, because we can't depend on some have already indicated where they're standing, but we have to try to get as many ordinary people in the Caribbean conscious of the issues and committed to sign on to a statement in defense of the sovereignty of our region and for the region to be a zone of peace.
Absolutely. And we have a comment from Onika St. John, who is saying, sad times in the USA, we are not free. He will continue to use the National Guard and FBI to persecute political opposition. I mean, this is not new, is it? I mean, look at what they did to the civil rights fighters. I think many in this generation are just beginning to realize the extent of American militarism when it's turned against its own people. But African Americans have experienced this for centuries. That imperialist violence has been turned on itself internally as well. So Onika St. John, to your point there, but we do want to get to some closing comments. But before we do that, I do want you gentlemen to react to the recent announcement by the United States that they were going to impose visa restrictions against certain government ministers in Grenada for publicly advocating support for the government of Cuba against accusations of human trafficking. The U.S. now is saying that Cuban medical professionals, we did an entire program on that last week. And of course, that there are those who are lending credence to that idea. And we have some other programming on that. I'm not going to reveal what it would be, but there is some other programming on that what we'll be addressing. But substantively, I want us to talk about, finally, of course, the opposition in Grenada is criticizing the government for failure of diplomacy, which resulted in that. But what they have not done is to critique the actual sanctioning or to come out in full support of the Cuban medical mission there. So it was interesting to see what their reaction was in that respect. But I want us to react to that, if you will, around the decision, because other countries, Jomo, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines also declared that he was willing to have his visa revoked. Mia Mottley, same thing in Barbados. She was willing to have her visa revoked. But I found it interesting that they only targeted Grenada here. So let's get your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know. I think that maybe I just want to turn the screws slowly but surely. So it's Grenada today, and maybe Barbados and St. Vincent later. Because as you correctly said, Prime Minister Gonzalez and Mia Mottley jumped out very early and said,
and they were in fact the first ones. The record would show.
That's
and it
what
was
I'm saying.
only after they spoke that media in Grenada, well, in the case of one minister, he was on a To The Point program on the Grenada Broadcasting Network, asked him to respond to that. That's Mr. Cornwall, who incidentally, I believe, studied in Cuba.
But I think there may be a tactic. There may be a tactic to this, because Mr. Cornwall is a Cuban-trained economist, and a lot of people want to migrate to the U.S. from time to time. So maybe the message that they're sending is, if you are Cuban-trained and you stand up in the way in which Mr. Cornwall so forcefully said that, look, I see no problem with this. The Cuban training, we were well trained. I support this mission of the Cubans. It's not human trafficking. They want to signal, because you see, they use hard power and soft power depending on where they're going. So it's really, really, really unfortunate, and it's even more unfortunate where you have as you said, the opposition criticizing them for failure of diplomacy, because the U.S. is not doing diplomacy, or to the extent that it's doing diplomacy at all. It is that big stick diplomacy, where essentially what it's doing is saying, you either go my way or I'm going to sanction you. That is not a way to run a foreign policy establishment. And certainly it may reflect, and I hate to talk about the dying days of the U.S. empire, because the dying days may well take us years or decades from now. But I think that in my being, in my soul, I have the feeling that the circle is closing, and that some of these countries are going to come out from under the oppressive conditions which the US and Europe has imposed on the world over the last 500 years.
Mr. Pereira, same thing. I want to react to the decision by the US to sanction. The irony was not lost on me that they went after Grenada first, given Grenada's history of revolution, 79 to 1983. But please proceed.
Well, it's interesting what Brother Jomo pointed out about the minister, the brother who is a trained economist who studied in Cuba. What they're doing is this. They're targeting the Cuban medical brigades. They're saying that Cuba is using the medical brigades, trafficking in people. It's forced labor and all of that. So, of course, imperialism doesn't look at things that, concepts, deep spiritual values and concepts such as solidarity, standing up for others, justice, affirming the dignity of the human person. So the Cuban medical brigades have done tremendous, the contribution they've made across the globe, even during COVID in parts of Italy. is just phenomenal. And that comes out of an ideology of philosophy that puts the human being first above profits and anything else. And Fidel Castro said many moons ago that Cuba's dream is to become a medical superpower. And the United States is trying to see how much they're applying more and more pressure to strangle Cuba. And you raise the issue about the potential invasion of Cuba, maybe Venezuela, then Cuba next, and not to leave out Nicaragua. They're applying sanctions to on the Sandinista. So I don't know why. I would not be able to say exactly why they started with Grenada, but I know pressures are already to on Guyana. Pressures are on Guyana. So maybe if any one of us, if you have a visa, a U.S. visa, and you decide to go to Cuba for medical treatment, you can lose your U.S. visa. Well, I don't have a U.S. visa, never had a U.S. visa. And many moons ago, I've been denied entrance there. I don't even get a transit visa, and I'm not even allowed to fly over. So I'm out today, that's where I am. But I'm saying that this is what the empire is doing. The empire is going to put more pressure on governments. They start off with individuals, and then the governments themselves will have to. There are those governments, as my brother pointed out, who are going to cave in. There are those who are going to stand up, like in the case of Mia Mottley in Barbados, Ralph Gonzalez in St. Vincent. I don't know where. I haven't heard much recently of Prime Minister Skerritt in Dominica. But this is they're actually, when I read between the lines, they're actually telling the government of Guyana, when you read between the lines, look, just break off, have nothing to do with the Cuban Medical Brigade. They actually want us to send them packing. That is the direction. That is what they want. That's on their agenda. And they start off peace, peace, peace. And that is where they're heading.
Absolutely, Brother Abdullah, of course. And again, there was a former Minister of Health, I believe, Dr. Khan, who I did invite him on the program before to speak to this question of the Cuban Medical Brigade, because he sees it differently. And he tends to agree with the U.S. positioning, which should not be surprising given that the party that he supports, the leader of the party that he supports, has adopted such a close pro-American posture. Mr. Abdullah?
Yeah, yes. And let me say that, without the Cuban medical brigades, the condition in terms of our health sector right throughout the Caribbean would be humongously worse than it may already be. And of course, different countries are different levels. But if all the Cuban medical health professionals left the Caribbean, then we would be in serious trouble indeed. We just wouldn't have enough nurses or doctors in many cases. In a situation where the global north, and now in the case of the Middle East, the rich oil countries in the Middle East have been taking our health professionals and offering them much better salaries and terms and conditions that our governments have been able to offer them. And so we are losing our health professionals, yes, to the north, but the Americans don't see a problem with that. And so if we get health professionals coming from Cuba, they see a problem with that. And just think about the different value of placed on humanity. And so during COVID, the Americans refused under the blockade to allow syringes to be sent to Cuba for Cuba to be able to vaccinate its people. Now, Cuba didn't need vaccines for anybody. They developed their own, yes? Correct. But there was a shortage of syringes. They don't manufacture syringes. And the Americans refused that at a moment when the whole world was dealing with a global pandemic. And so measure that against Cuba then sending health professionals to our countries, including Trinidad and Tobago during COVID and so on, and Barbados and elsewhere, to assist with, especially with, intensive care units where we had shortage of health professionals in those areas because we needed so many more professionals in the area of intensive care. So that's just view those two behaviors, and you will see where we need to stand in this regard. And the U.S. is just, well, I was almost going to use an expletive. I was almost going to use an expletive. The U.S. is just so full of hypocrisy and duplicity and crap, really, when it comes. They have absolutely no moral authority. Absolutely none to tell us about anything. When within the United States, it's people that don't have as good healthcare as the Cubans have. When there's greater illiteracy in the United States than in Cuba, and so on and so on and so on. And we could go on and on. They have absolutely where people are treated, discriminated against, and are killed on the basis of race. And now look what ICE is doing to Caribbean people who are legally in the United States and how they're being treated, and so on. So they have no moral authority to tell us about democracy or about governance or about anything else, or about who we should deal with and who we should not deal with. And we as Caribbean people have to stand up for our right to self-determination, because when we became independent, Trinidad and Tobago in 1962, Jamaica in 1962, August 6th, Jamaica, August 31st, Trinidad and Tobago, Americans who are African Americans didn't have the right to vote, yes, and were being discriminated against, couldn't go and use the same restaurants and restrooms, and couldn't sit in the same seats on buses in 1962 when we became independent, yes. So they have no moral authority to tell us about anything, and we have to stand up for ourselves as independent, sovereign nations and people who have come out of enslavement, through enslavement, out of indentureship, through colonialism, and are now trying to fashion a Caribbean civilization. That's my closing comment.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Bob, for having this particular discussion.
Yes, Brother Abdullah, before you go, though, you do have a very interesting story that you shared with me when you were in Grenada. The fact that you were, in fact, I believe you were deported from Grenada or denied entry into the country immediately following 1983. I would love for you to share that story with our guests, because I do know that you were very, with our audience rather, I knew though that you did have a very close relationship with the Grenada Revolution. So tell us what happened.
Yeah.
And it's not only you, I've heard many interesting anecdotes of that period. So for example, many of the Grenadian doctors, Cuban-trained Grenadian doctors who returned to Grenada following in the immediate post-revolutionary period, they were spied on. Some of them were denied employment opportunities and things like that. So tell us what happened to you in I believe, 1984 when you were trying to come to Grenada?
It would have been 1984. Yes, it was cricket time. So because I remember West Indies was playing somebody in March of 1984. So Terry Marisho and others, Maurice Bishop Patriotic Movement, were planning activities around March 13th to celebrate March 13th, 1979. And so I landed at the what is now Maurice Bishop
International Airport.
International Airport. And it had just been opened and so on to commercial traffic. And the immigration officer said, well, you're being denied entry. So he was listening to cricket on the radio. That's why I remember it had to be March, right? Listening to cricket on the radio. So I said, so you support West Indies? He said, yeah. I said, well, I support West Indies cricket too. So how come both of us support the West Indies cricket and I can't come into Grenada? I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and a whole set of people in Grenada live in Trinidad and Tobago and so on. And he said, boss, that decision come from high up, right? I can't do anything about that. That come from high up. So I sat down, I had to sit in the departure lounge or whatever. The next plane back to Trinidad, I went back. But that's not the first place I was deported from. The first place was in Guyana. When I came to Guyana, when Walter and others, Omawali, Karen D'Souza and so on, were on trial for allegedly burning down the PNC secretariat. And I came in but I also came in to do research on pension issues, because we had a pension struggle with Texaco, and Maurice Odell was an economic expert in pensions. So I came in with others, Alan Alexander and many others from the region and so on. And I spoke at a rally in Georgetown organized by the Guyana Human Rights Council, which was co-chaired by Gordon Todd and by Bishop Randolph George being the Anglican Bishop of Guyana, who was in Trinidad and Tobago. My father was the Anglican Bishop of Trinidad and Tobago at the time. So I came in for that. And when I spoke at that, and I didn't talk about Ghana at all, I talked about Trinidad and Tobago. The next day, immigration looked for me, and I went to report it to Brickdam, where they had their place, and I was held. I was then taken to the Timeri airport, and I saw the plane, going back to Trinidad. They said, no, that's not the plane, and so on. I was put in the Timeri police station lockup, and the news reports came over saying that I had been sent out of Ghana at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, where I was very much there. And people were calling the police station, I was hearing the phone calls. And they said, no, we have nobody here by that name. So the Trinidad and Tobago High Commissioner to Guyana, the Anglican Bishop of Georgetown, Bishop George, family friend, and others, lawyers, Moses Bagwan, Miles Fitzpatrick, and others were trying to locate me. Nobody could locate me. And I was in the police station, and I was told, don't come back to Guyana ever again. And the next time I came back to Guyana was after Forbes Burnham passed away. Didn't come back while he was alive. I did come back subsequently, and I've been back on a number of other occasions. So, yeah, we have had many issues within the region about denial of entry. I was in Jamaica as a student. I was born in Jamaica, grew up in Jamaica when Walter Rodney was banned from entry to Jamaica, and Kingston rioted, and Ralph Gonzalez led a major protest by the Students Guild, of which he was president, and Patrick Manning, who was a student, was part of that, later Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, in solidarity with Walter Rodney. So there are lots of issues as we talk about Caribbean integration, Caribbean sovereignty, that we need to unpack and talk about. George Weeks, President General of the OVT, was banned from nearly everywhere in the Caribbean after 1970 and found refuge in Antigua briefly because of the support by George Walters at the time and Tim Hector and others in Antigua, and the small union that was being developed in Antigua at the time. So we have to talk about all those issues. And unfortunately, where we are in the Caribbean now, some of us may become persona non grata in other Caribbean countries because of the political stance that we are taking on principle. But we have to break those boundaries, Dr. Bob, and thank you for doing that in this program.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for agreeing to appear on the program. You're such a font. All of you gentlemen really are font of history. And, I was saying to someone, in fact, I was saying to Margaret Francis, I believe, that the children of the 70s, I consider you all the greatest generation in the Caribbean, because you guys, in the context of Grenada, you had high schoolers taking it to Gary. It was young people who took it to Eric Williams with the Black Power movement in Trinidad and Tobago. Really young people in their teens, early 20s who did that. Young people these days are twiddling their thumbs on TikTok, but don't even get me started on that.
No, I wouldn't sit here. I would not sit here and chat about our young people. The young
just
people
before you go, brother Bob, I just want to give a special.
Yes, go ahead, Jomo, and then I'll get you.
I just want to give a special salute to my brother David. David, over the years, has stood out. He's a staunch anti-imperialist. He has been consistent over the years. And, like Kwame Ture always said, revolutionaries, people like us, we must always be consistent and we should be clear as crystal. Brother Abdallah, over the years, like us here in Guyana OVP, we have been clear as crystal. We know who are our friends and who are our enemies. And I just want to say to him that statement or declaration, you have to contact me. You can add our organization to that statement.
Absolutely. Yes, but stick a pin, Mr. Pereira, because Jomo has to go. So, Jomo, over to your closing comments. And you wanted to quickly respond to my statement, my frustration with some of the young people.
I wouldn't sit here. I will not sit here.
Jomo, let me justify my statement, please.
I know.
Because there's a generation of Grenadian youth, and I blame the elders too for that in Grenada, who have no clue about the greatness of Grenadian history. They have absolutely no clue about the two Grenadian revolutions. Well, the three of them, if you count the Fedon Rebellion. They have no clue about the 1951 Proletariat Revolution, and they have absolutely no clue about 79 to 1983. In fact, all they tell you is, the Americans attacked in 1983.
But who do you blame for that?
Makes me sick. Well, and as I said, the elders are responsible for that. Absolutely. I do blame the elders for that. Yes, correct.
You blame us.
Yes.
Because the fact that there's a lack of understanding of our history is, you can't blame the young people. There's something remiss. something that we have not done. And then when you add on top of that, the explosion of the information revolution, where you have more information now but less knowledge, because there are all kind of distractions. And this is why we have to step by step, one by one, speak with young people, try to turn them out, try to get something to turn in them. Remember, Fidel Castro says every generation has to find its own Moncada to climb. Not Moncada, your own Sierra Maestra to climb. So we have to find something that would hold our people. If it means some of them holding on to the culture, that's a significant thing. I mean, there's a Vincentian woman called Elma Francois. Nobody in St. Vincent knows her, but she's a national hero in Trinidad. She says, look, young people, everybody, you have to read, but you have to know. You must not read stupidness. That's Elma Francois. And we have to bring those messages back to the people so that they would know. But we can't. It's like people say, oh, the people in St. Vincent are stupid because Gonzalez is there for 5 years. I'm 25. We can't blame people. We have to blame who. Why are we not bringing examples? Why are we not bringing experiences? Why are we not sufficiently clear in putting views and opinions across that can counter a narrative? Because it's always narrative and counter narrative. So I really have to leave because I have a client that's waiting now.
Yes. So I was offering you a chance for closing
I paid to
comments
come to the United States. Now I need to pay to go back.
Yeah. So
brother,
thank you so
brother,
much, Joe.
Brother Bob. I agree with you that many of us, the older generation, have contributed to what the Haitian historian and anthropologist Michel Rafteau referred to as silence in the past. We're not doing enough. We're not running educational programs to raise this level of consciousness. We're not putting the study of history at the center, letting the young people understand, as CLR James said, that there is no present without the past and that the future is in the present. So you have that interconnection, and that history is not something of the past. It's being made every day, and it's important that we do this. And I know that there are organizations that are doing it. We have platforms. Brother Abdallah can tell you we have platforms. We're doing it. In Guyana, we have an educational arm called the George G. M. James Institute, named after the great Guyanese who wrote the book Stolen Legacy. And we run programs of that. We teach about the Cuban Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and all of these struggles, the Black Power movement in Trinidad and so. Because you have to, this new generation of cadres that we're preparing must be ideologically equipped. There is no political education. So right now, in closing, I just want to say, we have 6 political parties contesting the elections in Guyana. There's some small ones under an umbrella called APNO. But there's no discussion of imperialism. And all of these political parties, you know what they all have in common? They all subscribe to the neoliberal capitalist agenda. All of them. All of them. That is what they all have in common. There's no class analysis. There's no analysis of the role of imperialism, the struggle to complete the national liberation struggle in Guyana and Trinidad and those countries, so that we can achieve what is called true independence. Go beyond the flag and anthem independence that we have, or what Walter Rodney referred to as the briefcase independence, and achieve substantial true independence, economic independence, and true sovereignty. Because where we are now, we are being dictated to and we are being bullied by the empire.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Of course, we will be relying on your expertise and your experience as we continue to see, as we like to say here on the Bubb Report, as we watch the space. We'll be watching the space to see what unfolds. We'll be seeing what the government of Trinidad and Tobago, we have to have an entire conversation. What is the point of CARICOM these days anyways, right? What is the point of it? Just who was the leader that said one from 0 leaves not, or something like that? I think we're really bad.
1 from 10 leaves.
1 from 10 leaves not. I think Dr. Eric Williams, Eustace Williams said that correct about the Federation. I think right now we're looking at the disintegration of this CARICOM experiment that began with the Treaty of Chaguaramas, really, with everything that's happening.
The economist Clive Thomas once he wrote a paper on CARICOM, and the title was CARICOM, a Paper Tiger.
A paper tiger, there you go. All right. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week.
Yeah, thank you for having us, brother.
Yes. Absolutely.
Anytime.
Viewers and listeners, this has been yet another episode of the Bubb Report, and we do want to get to some comments. Ronnie Slinger is saying, so many issues that involves the Caribbean over the decades. We can go back to the songs of the different countries that tells stories like Weevil's Caribbean Man from Grenada, early 1970. Ernesto is saying, I like listening to this brother, full of information and a true revolutionary. Someone is saying Guyana has the potential to be the greatest country in the Caribbean. Then we have another comment. Doreen Ramsey is saying, to be a friend of the U.S. is dangerous, but to be an enemy is lethal. And Adrian Boyk is saying, great panel, Dr. Bubb. We, as small Caribbean nations, have the absolute right to make decisions on the healthcare we receive. We applaud Cuba for all they've done. Let's continue to fight the imperialists, i.e. David and Goliath. Then Martin Felix is saying, yes, about the whole Israel-Palestine question there. Then we have another comment that I missed, I believe. Arthur Langain, good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Langain. Thank you, Dr. Bubb. Great show as always. So, folks, this takes care of the program. If you have not shared today's live stream, please share it with a friend. Please share it with someone if you're over on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe to our page as the platform continues to grow so that other people can actually have an opportunity to participate in the programming that we try to bring to you here every Sunday. So on behalf of my producers, I am your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone. And then Onika is saying here, great show, I learned a lot. Thank you, Dr. Bubb, for this platform. Very impressive panelists. My 10-year-old says, Dr. Bubb, again. Hopefully I meet you and your 10-year-old at some point. So thank you so much for your participation. And again, on behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant week ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Hi everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.